Story 1. Oddly enough, Donald Trump has also called for capital punishment to be protected under an executive order yesterday. Treason was one of those capital punishments the founding fathers would have supported. Trump is playing ball for himself and his billionaire friends who sat behind him. Any working-class American that voted for Trump has turned their back on American ideals and are in it for their own self-interest. No one has the courage to decide what's best for the nation when they vote. It's all me, 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 being led by the me generation that has hoarded wealth for decades. Look at your own values seriously. I was a Republican until Trump. Those who have remained on board are either evil or ignorant, and ignorance is a choice in today's world. A Nazi salute was used during an inauguration celebration. But somehow, for Trump supporters, Elon Musk is both a genius and a moron who accidentally threw up a Nazi salute twice. Story 2. This subreddit every time, LOL. The question, conservatives. The replies, liberal, 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 pretending to be a conservative, liberal. Story 3. Moderate conservative, not make America great again. I do not like or support the pardoning of violent rioters. This seems to be the general consensus among conservatives I personally know. Story 4. You can check my comment history. I am conservative but also very much against Trump. He uses my religion like a prop and core tenets as something to toss aside. What's all this small government stuff? Don't we like things to be huge in America? The pardons are nonsense, but the fact that he was able to run again is also absurd. He added more to the debt on an annual basis than any president ever. He gave Putin everything he wanted. He wrote the plan for leaving Afghanistan that Biden made worse. Same thing happened with Eisenhower, Kennedy, and the Bay of Pigs. First day in office, and he removes us from a global organization focused on health and medical oversight and removes price caps on medications. Then, he pardons all of his dumbest supporters and a man who created a platform for drugs and child pornography, and starts a confrontation with cartographers over something that makes no sense. I didn't vote for him, but I wonder how my mother-in-law who's taking arrhythmia medication on Medicare is going to like her renewal after supporting him through her condo complex. Actually, I don't really wonder. She's going to find someone else to blame, and then she and my wife will complain about some shadow group causing so much inflation again. Welcome to Forget You, I've Got Mine, formerly known as the United States of America. Story 5. Those who arrived with Confederate flags and zip ties, forget them, let them face consequences for their actions. Those who caused physical harm to law enforcement officers or led the charge in breaking in, forget these people as well. The people who showed up to protest and got caught up in the mob in the moment, I have a degree of sympathy for them because, psychologically, mob mentality taking over is a real phenomenon. Community service for these people that benefits their community. Story 6. If conservatives could read, they still would not answer this. Edit. I want the Trump voters getting mad at me to know they are traitors and Nazi sympathizers and that I will probably just block them. Story 7. I wouldn't have pardoned violent offenders and disagree with it. Some people were let in and the lines get gray. Anyone who committed violence or physically broke in deserves to serve a reasonable punishment. Law and order. I want it applied in all cases and for all crimes, to riots on both sides of the aisle, to create deterrence resulting in safer cities. Story 8. They are not going to engage with you here, but you can read all about it. Story 9. If I were in the Secret Service or Capitol Police, I would definitely remember the amount of concern these clowns had for me when it was time to step up to protect them. Story 10. How do you feel that Joe Biden pardoned a man who killed 2 Federal Bureau of Investigation agents? How do you feel about the fact that thousands of rioters burned buildings, raped, robbed, and pillaged, and even murdered without ever being arrested? Story 11. Ask this question in the subreddit Ask Politics. You can specify that you want answers from the right, and then only people with the appropriate flair indicating they are on the right can make top-level comments. Best chance to get an answer on Reddit. Story 12. 80 or so of them did not get pardons. I believe the ones with violence charges were among those, though I guess I read that here now that I think about it. So who knows if that's even true. Story 13. I'm more of an independent really, but it's disappointing, just like every pardon given out in the last 72 hours. All of them reveal some of the many flaws in the system. Story 14. At this point, I couldn't think any less of Mr. Orange. If he were a piece of toilet paper blowing in the wind and I was on the side of the road with uncontrollable diarrhea, with nothing to wipe but still had a 5-hour drive to civilization, where I had the chance to have a reverse Uno frog/princess slash my backside on fire would turn him back into a human being, I'd gladly pull my pants up and drive in the wet, stinky mess that is festering in a summer car with no air conditioning for the 5 hours. Story 15. I am a retired police officer as of 2023 and conservative. The sentences that were handed out were overzealous political nonsense moves. I support the pardoning. The January 6th event was a joke and definitely not even remotely an insurrection. I have seen all of the footage, all of it. Story 16. I am not a conservative. I also did not support President Joe Biden, but I was literally just talking about this. It is so baffling how so many supporters of former President Donald Trump claim to back the police, and Trump himself pushed the same message. Yet, so many of those same supporters violently attacked police officers on January 6th, leaving 140 officers injured, some with crushed spinal discs, traumatic brain injuries, and even a heart attack. And then, to top it off, Trump pardons them? It just does not add up to me. Story 17. I feel like the individuals that entered walked around, and there is no evidence of any damages being done to person or property, deserve a pardon. Individuals who did property damage, let us look at sentences and discuss. Individuals who caused bodily harm, had detainment devices or weapons, throw the book at them. Story 18. Depends on the level of assault. Simply shoving an officer? I think 4 years is enough. If they actively attempted to murder the officer, I think they should have stayed in jail. But that is dependent on whether they had a fair trial, which many of the January 6 people prosecuted didn't and haven't. In fact, many have had their due process rights violated. I expect many lawsuits in the next few years over this treatment they received. Story 19. Did the January 6th committee prove that anyone actually assaulted police officers? Take a look at their findings. Oh, we can't. All their work seems to have disappeared. Story 20. After years of Black Lives Matter rioters not only getting off scot-free after burning cities to the ground, but also receiving bail money help from Kamala Harris, it was just fine. Besides, it was mostly peaceful. Story 21. But they were anti-fascists, right? Right? Because it was a bad thing they did. But it wasn't us. It was them framing us, right? But now the anti-fascists are heroes. Story 22. It's assault when conservatives do it. But it's a peaceful protest when liberals light mortar fireworks and throw them at police officers' faces? Left or right FTP? Story 23. From what I gather, they're a bit confused on the subject. Whenever the event is brought up, MAGA folks say that the rioters were actually flag-waving Antifa people. Now that they've been pardoned, overnight they've transformed into poorly treated hardworking Americans. It's almost as if asserting the convenient is the backbone of modern political discourse. Story 24. If they had been treated like the rioters they are, I would be annoyed. Charge them accordingly, punish them appropriately, and be done with it. But that's not what's happened. They've been treated like some sort of massive, ongoing threat to national security, as if letting them stop to breathe for even a moment would see cities wiped from the map and pretty much everything else. They've spent years trying to suggest that a half-naked man in a fur hat and that one man who stole a small flagpole were somehow going to single-handedly wipe out the entire United States government and destroy the very concept of democracy forever. And that's just not the case. Meanwhile, the people who murdered dozens in the streets and set cities ablaze after George Floyd haven't been hunted or persecuted at all, despite causing vastly more damage. The Democrats have been making a molehill into Olympus Mons. It needs to stop. So I don't have any complaints. Story 25. A more important question for Trump supporters would be, how do you feel about Donald Trump scamming his supporters yet again with a pump and dump cryptocurrency scheme? Story 26. Because the punishments were disproportionate to the crimes committed and politically motivated to send a message from a weaponized justice system. How many protesters are still serving time for the Black Lives Matter riots and looting sprees in 2020? Likely none, because the government was not singling them out to make a political statement. Story 27. Wait, hold on. Let me go check something real quick. Here we go. Those rioters were the victims of socioeconomic status and had no choice but to engage in criminal activity due to factors like poverty and limited opportunities. They were mostly peaceful protests, and we all know that rioting is the voice of the unheard. They were disproportionately affected by our legal system. Something about progress. Story 28. The next 4 years are going to be wild on Reddit. But seriously, is there a way to just filter out Reddit politics? I like this subreddit, but I don't care to see any crying about Trump. Love how Reddit bots are downvoting me for not wanting to deal with politics. Story 29. Dislike. Commuting their sentences if they were overcharged, which many were, I could understand, but not full pardons. Full pardons for everyone who was nonviolent and simply walked around are fine. Story 30. As someone who leans right, I feel those who attacked officers should go through due process and get a fair trial. Those who simply entered the building should not have been held in jail or prison all of this time. Story 31. They don't care because they have pledged loyalty to the cult. And the #1 rule in this cult is, never, for any reason, go against the leader. Weak men. Story 32. Same way I feel about all the people that burned and looted cities across the country that faced zero consequences for their actions. Either we have standards or we do not. It is pretty evident that both sides in this country will become violent when they feel justified to do so. Story 33. I feel about the same as I feel about all of Biden's pardons. When there is a felt need to protect your allies from people using the justice system for retaliation, then the justice system is completely broken. Story 34. Thanks to President Biden, when it comes to personal matters, nothing is off limits now. Hunter apologized and said, "Oops, pardon me." And his father said, "You're pardoned." Biden and his Democratic team abused the law to eliminate a political opponent and manipulate evidence related to anything involving Trump, including the January 5th protesters. Based on Trump's unprecedented win, it's clear that the majority of Americans don't trust or believe what they've been told about what actually happened that day. After COVID-19 and the last 4 years of the Biden administration, they've come to realize that all is not what it seems. Having said that, what's good for Biden is good for Trump. The pardons have been issued. End of story. Story 35. Same as I feel about Biden pardoning all the ones he did with 10 minutes to go in his presidency. Fauci's preemptive pardon was interesting. I would love to know the crimes he committed that Biden knows about. Story 36. On August 11, 1999, Clinton commuted the sentences of 16 members of the Armed Forces of National Liberation, a Puerto Rican paramilitary organization that set off 120 bombs in the United States, mostly in New York City and Chicago. Story 37. Strangely enough, I'm really happy about it. Almost as much fun as watching leftists melt down, throw temper tantrums, and cry like the little babies they are. The feeling of pleasure from someone else's misfortune is fantastic. Story 38. States changed election laws unconstitutionally due to the pandemic. We have a right to question. Instead, they shut us down at every turn. By the way, how many officers were hurt in the riots for the methamphetamine user and woman abuser George? Black neighborhoods burned to the ground. Innocent elderly were dragged out of cars at city intersections. Stop with your comments on January 6th. Story 39. I never thought January 6th was a big deal. Meanwhile, during the George Floyd protests, people were rioting for over a month and cost hundreds of millions of dollars to the cities they burned down, and those people were being let go right away. January 6th lasted but a few hours, and the riots lasted over a month. And when that was going on, the Democrats all wanted police officers to die. Now we're at the point where we should defend the police. January 6th is such a non-issue. I don't even know how it keeps getting brought up. What do these people deserve? Life in prison for punching people? We have officers on a daily basis who talk people out of pressing charges for fistfighting. These people spent so much time in prison overthrowing some fists. Get over it. Story 40. While I don't condone violence against law enforcement, the justice system was not applied equally. All across the country, illegal immigrants, criminals, gang members, and just plain scumbags assault law enforcement every day and never see the type of legal prosecution that the January 6th rioters did. Story 41. Poorly, but as usual, I feel even more poorly about the liberals. Talking heads making a stink about the people Trump pardoned when they've been supporting Black Lives Matter riots against the police for years now. Story 42. Conservatives do not have a baseline. Their standards and morals flow whichever way the stream of Donald Trump's rhetoric is influencing them. They are told what to feel and think, so if someone on a radio show tells them that this is different because of reasons, they will believe it so they can sleep at night. So they do not walk around knowing they are spineless humans with a lack of empathy and intelligence. Story 43. The defense teams were not allowed access to all evidence. There was a game played between the January 6th committee and the Georgia case whereby everyone could claim they did not have the evidence. If you choose to prosecute people without respect for their due process rights, then I do not respect the verdict that follows. That's how I feel about it.